He fired me with a pie chart. I remembered the projector's cold light on his face as Ethan, the new CEO brought in to shake things up, pointed to a red slice on the screen. Senior Account Management, the label read. The slice represented my salary. As you can see, he said with the confidence of a shark that smells blood in the water, we have an account maintenance cost here that is completely out of line with market standards. I had been with the agency for 12 years. I didn't manage accounts. I cultivated legacies. My main responsibility was Harrison & Sons, a luxury goods brand that had been with us since our founding. They weren't a client. They were partners. I knew their history, their family feuds, the favorite wine of the old patriarch, Mr. Harrison. My job was an art form of conversations that didn't fit on spreadsheets, and a trust built over a decade. But to Ethan, if it couldn't be measured by a KPI, it didn't exist. He was the new face of management, young, aggressive, and data-obsessed. He saw my relationship with Harrison & Sons not as the pillar that held up the agency, but as a dusty antique. We are replacing this analog approach with an integrated CRM system and a junior engagement team, more efficient, more scalable. Humiliation, served cold in a packed conference room. He was calling me obsolete in front of the team I had helped train. I felt the stares of my colleagues, a mixture of shock and embarrassment. I could have felt back. I could have talked about the contracts I saved with a single phone call, about the crises I averted because I knew Mr. Harrison's mood. But instead, I settled back in my chair, a serene smile on my face. "A bold strategy, Ethan," I said, my voice clear and steady. "I wish you every success." He seemed momentarily confused by my calmness. Then he smirked, as if he'd won a battle. But he had no idea that Harrison & Sons wasn't an account on his chart. It was a pact. A pact sealed with loyalty, respect, and a handshake. And he had just torn up the only copy of the contract that truly mattered. The first night was the longest. 12 years of a career, of business lunches, of last-minute trips, of having Mr. Harrison on speed dial, all erased by a PowerPoint slide. The corporate world I knew, built on trust and relationships, seemed to be replaced by a cold algorithm of efficiency. The humiliation hurt, but what wounded me most was the ignorance, the arrogance of thinking people and their histories could be discarded like old software. The next morning, my phone rang, an unknown number from upstate New York. I answered, hesitant. "Charlotte, my dear, what's this I hear about Ethan showing you the door?" The voice, raspy yet firm as an oak tree, was unmistakable. Mr. Harrison, the patriarch of Harrison & Sons, the man who, in 12 years, had never once called the agency. He always called me. My voice hitched for a moment. "Mr. Harrison, how did you know?" "I have my little birds in there," he said bluntly. "But tell me, is it true what I've been told, that this new boy thinks he can manage our account with a computer program?" "He believes in data, Mr. Harrison. He thinks our relationship can be replaced by CRM software." I heard a dry laugh on the other end of the line, a laugh that said everything. That boy doesn't understand a thing about real business. He doesn't understand a man's word. There was a pause. "Charlotte, you listen to me. The Harrison & Sons contract is not with your agency. It's with you." I stayed silent, trying to process it. "Years ago, I gave my word to your old boss, and my word is worth more than any signed paper. Our partnership exists because of the trust we place in you. Do you understand what I'm saying?" It slowly started to dawn on me, like a giant domino falling. "If you're not there, we're not there. Simple as that," he concluded. "Let the boy play with his charts. We'll see what data he has to present when 40% of the agency's revenue disappears."
He hung up. I stood there, phone in hand, feeling the ground solidify under my feet for the first time in 24 hours. The pact. Ethan didn't know. He had no idea that in firing me, He wasn't cutting a cost. He was cutting the company's lifeline. And in that moment, the sting of betrayal gave way to a new razor-sharp feeling. I didn't have a detonator. I had a shield and a sword. The tables have completely turned for Charlotte. If you, like me, can't wait to see what happens next, take a quick moment and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the outcome of this story and others like it. Silence was my orchestra. Unlike the previous story, my power didn't manifest in flashing alarms, but in a complete absence of communication. It was a heavy, expensive, and, for me, delicious silence. I knew the annual Harrison & Sons contract was up for renewal. It was the agency's largest and most complex contract, and I always kicked it off with an informal lunch with Mr. Harrison. On Wednesday, a week after my dismissal, I got a text from a former colleague in finance. "Charlotte, what's going on with Harrison & Sons? Ethan has sent them 3 emails with no response. The junior team tried calling and got stonewalled by the secretary." I just replied with a smiling emoji. On Thursday, the pressure mounted. Ethan himself called me, a number he surely had to ask HR for. I let it go to voicemail. The message was a masterpiece of arrogance disguised as concern. "Charlotte, Ethan here. I know our conversation was abrupt, but I'm trying to finalize the renewal paperwork for Harrison, and they're not being collaborative. Could you pass me the direct contact for the person responsible for signatures? We need to expedite this." He still didn't get it. He thought it was a matter of having the right phone number, not the right person. On Friday morning, the tone shifted. An email with the subject line, "Urgent, contract renewal, Harrison & Sons." "Charlotte, I'm not kidding. Their lack of response is starting to worry the board. Your severance agreement includes a cooperation clause. I need your help to unlock this conversation. It's a matter of professionalism." Professionalism. The word he'd used to humiliate me was now the lifeline he was trying to grab. He didn't apologize. He didn't admit his mistake. He tried to use a contract to force me to fix the bridge he had just dynamited. I took a sip of my coffee. His panic began to reek of desperation, and the urgency, once again, was entirely his. The call that confirmed the implosion came on Friday afternoon. It was Mark, the creative director, one of the few left from the old guard. "Charlie, are you sitting down?" he asked, getting straight to the point. "Always when I'm expecting your gossip," I joked. "This isn't gossip. It's an earthquake. Mr. Harrison called. Not Ethan, of course. He called the old owner's desk, who's just a board member now. Sent a message, really." I waited, a shiver of anticipation running down my spine. And the message? The message was for the entire board. He said, and these were his exact words, that Harrison & Sons does not do business with companies that treat their most loyal partners like numbers on a spreadsheet, and that the only person authorized to discuss the future of their brand was you. A slow smile formed on my face. "And Ethan?" I asked. "The board called him into an emergency meeting. Our data genius CEO walked in all puffed up with a presentation on cost of reduction and personnel optimization. But the board didn't want to see it. One of the oldest directors simply asked, 'Ethan, did you even ask Charlotte how the relationship with Harrison & Sons worked before you fired her?' And what did he say? He tried to defend himself, said that relying on a single employee was a systemic risk he was trying to mitigate, said the agency couldn't be held hostage by personal relationships." Mark gave a bitter laugh. "That's when the old man dropped the bomb. He said that personal relationships, as you call it, accounts for 40% of our annual revenue, and you didn't mitigate it, you annihilated it. If this account is lost, the only systemic risk in this room will be you."
I closed my eyes, savoring every word. There it was. The validation.
his arrogance, exposed not by me, but by the cold, hard reality of the numbers he so dearly loved. "I don't know what you did, Charlotte," Mark said, his voice full of admiration, "but you've become the most powerful person in this company, without even being here." On Saturday morning, I received an email from the chairman of the board, the former owner. The tone was completely different. There were no corporate appeals, just a simple, direct request. "Charlotte, we need to talk. Please meet me for coffee on Monday, wherever you prefer." The choice of venue was already a concession, a sign that I wasn't being summoned, but invited. I chose a small artisanal bakery in my neighborhood, a neutral ground, far from the intimidating power of the Madison Avenue offices. I arrived on Monday, and he was already there, at a corner table. A man I had always respected, but who now looked smaller, more tired. "Charlotte, thank you for coming," he said, standing up. "I won't waste your time." I made a mistake. I approved Ethan's hiring. I bought into his talk about modernization and forgot what actually built this agency: trust. He paused, looking down at his coffee cup. "What he did to you was unthinkable. It wasn't a business decision. It was an act of arrogance. And now, we're about to pay the price. Harrison and Sons refuses to speak to anyone but you." I remained silent, letting his confession hang in the air. He wanted me to return, not just to save that account, but to take on a new role: head of strategic relations, with a seat on the board, so that this kind of stupidity can never happen again. It was an incredible offer, but it wasn't about the title. It was about ensuring that Ethan's philosophy, the dehumanization of work, was permanently eradicated. "I'll come back," I said, my voice calm, "but on very clear conditions. First, the Harrison and Sons contract renewal will be under a new model, where a percentage of the account's revenue is directly tied to me as a performance bonus, regardless of my title. The value Ethan saw as a cost will now be formalized as an asset." He nodded immediately. "Fair. Go on." "Second," I continued, "Ethan will be reassigned. I don't want the public humiliation of his firing. That's not my style. But he will be removed from all clients, all strategic decisions, and all personnel. He can analyze his charts in a room by himself until his contract runs out. The team needs to see that the numbers over people culture has been defeated." He looked at me for a long time. There was surprise in his eyes, perhaps because I hadn't asked for Ethan's head on a platter. "You don't want revenge, do you?" he asked, genuinely curious. "I want respect," I replied, "for my work, for my team's work, and for the relationships we build. That's more powerful than any revenge." He extended his hand across the table. "You have my word. Welcome back, Charlotte. This time, on your terms." When I left the bakery, the sun on my face felt different. I wasn't just getting my job back. I was rewriting the rules of the game. And for the first time in a long time, the agency would be forced to recognize that its greatest asset wasn't in a piece of software, but in the people they had almost thrown away. Charlotte didn't just come back. She came back on top, setting the rules. Stories of strong women taking back control are the heart of our channel. If you support that strength, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a second of the justice that's coming. My return to the agency was quiet, but its impact was thunderous. Ethan was, as agreed, reassigned to a special internal data analysis project. In practice, he was put in a glass-walled office at the end of the hall, which the team quickly nicknamed the Fishbowl. He spent his days staring at spreadsheets, isolated and ignored. His defeat wasn't an event. It was a permanent condition. My first action was to fly to the Harrison and Sons estate. The contract renewal was signed not in a boardroom, but on the veranda of Mr. Harrison's home, over a glass of his vintage wine. It was a handshake, a gesture worth more than any digital signature. The news reached the agency before I even landed back in New York. The account was saved. The company's pillar was secure. My new title, Head of Strategic Relations, gave me power I'd never had. I began to restructure how accounts were managed, creating a mentorship system that valued experience and long-term relationships. Ethan's integrated CRM was demoted to a simple support tool, not the center of the strategy. The culture was slowly being healed. But I knew Ethan's ideas hadn't vanished with him. They had followers. A faction of younger managers whom he had hired himself saw my return as a step backward. They were the data boys who believed everything could be optimized and that loyalty was an outdated metric. Their retaliation was subtle, a corporate guerrilla war. First, my team's engagement reports started being accidentally omitted from the general presentations to the board. Then, a new potential client I was nurturing was approached by one of Ethan's managers with an aggressive, purely discount-based proposal, nearly ruining the relationship of trust I was building. The lowest blow was when a rumor began to circulate that I had only saved the Harrison account because I had an inappropriate personal relationship with Mr. Harrison. It was a disgusting attempt to turn my greatest strength, trust, into a weakness, into something sordid. It was a direct attack on my reputation, designed to isolate me and undermine my newly acquired authority. They didn't attack me head-on. They used the poison of gossip, of data omission, of veiled sabotage. They were Ethan's disciples, trying to prove their master right. But they underestimated one thing. I was no longer just an account manager. I now had a seat on the board, and I was documenting every single one of their optimizations. The war for the soul of the agency was far from over. The rumor about me and Mr. Harrison was the final straw. This was no longer a dispute of work philosophies. It was defamation. And I wasn't going to fight it with more gossip. I was going to use the power they gave me. At the next board meeting, instead of presenting my results, I proposed an efficiency and ethics audit for new business. The pretext was to evaluate whether our prospecting strategies were aligned with our brand values and if they were in fact profitable in the long run. The real target was the data boys and their aggressive tactics. The board, wary after the Ethan disaster, unanimously approved. The audit was my weapon. I didn't need to analyze VPN logs. I analyzed contracts, proposals, and most importantly, profit margins. The pattern that emerged was clear and damning. Ethan's faction, led by an ambitious manager named Bryce, was using a predatory strategy of offering absurd discounts and unsustainable promises to acquire new clients quickly. On paper, their acquisition numbers were impressive. In reality, they were bleeding the company dry. The accounts they brought in had sky-high churn rates, the profit margins were almost non-existent, and the cost to service their empty promises were enormous. They were inflating their own results with Pyrrhic victories, while solid, profitable accounts like Harrison and Sons were treated as outdated legacies. The final piece of my trap came from the finance department. The CFO, a quiet and rigorous woman, called me into her office. "Charlotte, the audit you requested is revealing something disturbing," she said, pointing to a spreadsheet. "Bryce's team has been reclassifying expenses from their unprofitable projects, moving the cost to the cost centers of other accounts, including Harrison and Sons, to cook the books." My blood ran cold. They weren't just being incompetent, they were committing fraud. They were artificially inflating the success of their methodology while simultaneously making my accounts, the healthiest in the agency, look less profitable than they really were.
"Do you have proof of this?" I asked, my voice firm. She opened a folder. "We have every entry, Bryce's approvals, and the emails where he instructs his team to creatively reallocate resources. He left a paper trail." This was it. The checkmate. They thought the war was about reputation, about hallway gossip, but the real war was about the company's survival, and they, in their arrogance to optimize everything, had left proof of their betrayal documented in spreadsheets and emails. I had the complete dossier. The next quarterly results presentation would be the perfect stage. They would bring their acquisition charts, and I would bring the truth. The boardroom was packed. It was the quarterly results presentation, the most important event on the corporate calendar. Bryce, the leader of the Data Boys, was visibly excited. He was scheduled to present first, with his colorful charts showing record growth in new client acquisition. Ethan, from the Fishbowl, was present, but like a ghost, sitting in a chair in the corner with no right to speak. Bryce gave his presentation with the arrogance of a conqueror. He spoke of disruption, agility, and quantifiable results. At the end, he couldn't resist a veiled jab. As you can see, while the legacy accounts maintain a predictable stability, the real growth and the future of the agency lie in our new aggressive prospecting methodology. All eyes turned to me. When it was my turn, I didn't use the projector. I asked for the lights to be turned up. "Thank you, Bryce, for that presentation," I began with a calm that unsettled the room. "The acquisition numbers are indeed impressive, but as a member of this board, my responsibility is to the financial health of this company, not to vanity metrics. And that is why the audit I requested has led us to an alarming conclusion." I handed a folder to each board member. "What you have in your hands," I continued as they flipped through the documents, "is the real story behind those numbers. New accounts with a negative profit margin, a 70% churn rate in under 6 months, and most seriously, a systematic and fraudulent practice of reallocating costs to inflate one department's performance and sabotage others." Bryce shot to his feet. "That's absurd. That's a serious accusation." "It's a fact," said the CFO, speaking for the first time. "And we have the emails and the ledger entries to prove it. You instructed your team to cook the books, Bryce. That isn't aggressive methodology, it's accounting fraud." Bryce's face went from the red of anger to the white of panic. He looked at his followers in the room, hoping for support, but they were now staring at the floor, avoiding his gaze. Their loyalty was to the ideology of quick success, and that ideology had just been exposed as a sham. The chairman of the board closed his folder with a dull thud. His eyes, cold as ice, locked onto Bryce. "Your presentation was very illuminating. It showed that the philosophy Ethan brought into this company is not just toxic, it's ruinous." He turned to the head of legal. "Please escort Mr. Bryce and his direct team out of the building. Their contracts are terminated for cause, based on the evidence of fraud in this audit. A more thorough investigation will follow." Bryce didn't say a word. He didn't look at me. He looked at Ethan, in the corner of the room, as if searching for an answer. But Ethan just sank deeper into his chair, the architect of a philosophy that had just consumed its own disciples. As they filed out in silence, I remained seated. The victory wasn't mine. It was Logic's. It was sustainability's. The proof that relationships of trust, built over years, are worth more than empty numbers on a spreadsheet. The departure of Bryce and his faction was like a breath of fresh air in an environment that had been suffocating. The audit revealed the extent of the damage. The growth at all cost strategy had nearly compromised the agency's long-term financial health. The board acted swiftly. Their firing was the final nail in the coffin of the era of the Data Boys. As for Ethan, his contract was not renewed. He disappeared quietly a few months later, a footnote in the history of the company he tried to revolutionize.
I didn't feel joy at their downfall. I felt a profound sense of relief. The battle for the soul of the agency had been won. The culture of trust and partnership, which I had championed, had been proven not just ethically right, but financially superior. A few weeks later, the chairman of the board called me into his office. "Charlotte," he began, "this agency owes you more than an apology. We owe our survival to your integrity. Your refusal to accept a philosophy that put numbers before people saved us." He handed me a document. "The board has made a decision.
We are not hiring a new CEO from the outside. We want you to take the position as president of the agency." I was speechless. I looked at him, surprised. I'm a relationship person, an accounts person. I'm not a CEO. "Exactly," he replied with a smile. "You are the kind of leader we need now. Someone who understands that our greatest asset isn't in a piece of software, but in the trust of our clients and the talent of our team. Someone who knows how to build, not just count." He paused. "Mr. Harrison called me yesterday. He said if you accepted, he would not only renew the contract for another 5 years, but he would also bring 2 more of the family's brands to our agency. He said, 'I don't invest in companies. I invest in leaders.'" In that moment, I understood. My journey wasn't about revenge against one man, but an affirmation of a principle. I accepted the position, not for power, but for responsibility. My first act as president was to institute the Harrison Clause in all new high-value contracts, a long-term bonus for teams that maintained the health and loyalty of a client for more than 3 years. The message was clear. We reward building bridges, not burning them. That night, from the window of the office that was once Ethan's, I looked out at the lights of New York City. I had been called obsolete, a cost to be cut. But I had proven that trust, loyalty, and human decency aren't liabilities. They are the most valuable assets in any business. And I wasn't just in charge of an agency. I was in charge of a legacy that I would now have the honor of protecting and expanding. Charlotte's story shows us that the best revenge is justice earned through intelligence and integrity. If you were inspired by her strength, please leave a like so YouTube can share this story with more people. And of course, if you're not yet part of our community, subscribe now so you don't miss any stories. It's amazing how narratives like this can connect people from all over. So we can get an idea of how far our stories are reaching. Please comment below what city, state, or country you're watching from right now. We would love to see our community on the map. Take care, and until the next story.